Do you hate talking about politics? Well, too bad, because that's what we're going to do right now. The U.S. is going through what might be one of the most divided times in our nation's political history. There are very few people who are on the fence with their political beliefs. One report says we're more divided than any time since the Civil War, and that's just a bit of posturizing. Some clickbait right there, but it's sort of true. Just look at the streets. Even the Washington Post just put out a report which said that the political affiliation gap has been closing for the last dozen years. Back in 2008, Democrats held a 30-point advantage in the U.S. Now, that gap is down to a 3-point advantage nationally. There's been a significant movement away from the Democrat Party, the Washington Post postulates. We're going to talk about which states are the most politically divided in this video. That means the toss-up states, or the swing states, or the places in the US where pretty much half the state votes blue and the other half votes red. Drama. So, turn off CNN and Fox News, and please stop sharing all those political memes on Facebook. We're going to visit America's most politically divided states today and see the truth about what's happening across America. Let's begin. A long time ago, there were more than just two main political parties. In our first elections, there were actually no Democrat versus Republican elections. Political parties were called independent, or federalist, or anti-administration, or Democrat-Republican. Then we had the Whigs and the Free Soil parties and the Know-Nothing Party. I bet most of you think that there's a political party today that's a Know-Nothing Party. Lately, it's been pretty much a two-party election until the last presidential election when we had 5 political parties represented. But combined, the other 3 parties accounted for just 5% of the total votes cast. It might seem like we're pretty divided politically in our own neighborhoods, but look at this map. Republicans tend to vote in urban areas and in the middle of the country, and people vote blue in urban areas and along the coast. From a higher level, this doesn't look very divided, does it? And before we begin, let's just briefly show the states we won't be talking about. These are those. On the left are states with huge Democratic advantages, and on the right are states with overwhelmingly Republican support. Not divided in these places at all. But for now, let's begin in one of our most politically divided states, Ohio. Here in Ohio, when you measure actual percentages of registered voters, it's very close. 42% of Ohio folks are registered Republican, and 41% are registered Democrat. But if you look at the recent presidential elections, it wasn't very close at all. Only in 2004 was a presidential election in Ohio very close. In the last election, Trump trounced Hillary by 8 points, despite the registered voting numbers for each side being much more close than that. That's because he was able to resonate with the working class crowd, especially those in manufacturing. Will this state remain so politically divided? Probably. But when you look at the near-term future of Ohio, there's indications that this state will continue to move more Republican. Ohio's remained very white and continues to maintain a lower percentage of college degree holders. But as we'll see, this is a very rare example of a state that's becoming more red. Here in Iowa, it's a statistical tie when it comes to the number of Republicans and Democrats who are registered to vote. Each has 42% of the state's voting pool. Iowa voted Republican just about every single time since it became a state, as farmers and Protestants led the charge in the elections back then. A long time ago, most of the immigrants who settled in Iowa were German farmers who voted Republican. But of late, the Hispanic population's booming here. Iowa has the 11th fastest growing Hispanic population in the nation. Another thing happened which tightened things up here. In the 80s, there was a big farm crisis, and about 150,000 farmers left this state. These Republican voting Iowa farmers felt that Ronald Reagan didn't help struggling Iowa farmers enough.
If spending more money on agriculture would solve the problem, we already would have solved it by now. We've got to create a future for the farmer that's every bit as bright as the future is for the rest of our economy.
But Iowa isn't just farmers anymore. 64% of Iowa's population now lives in urban cities, and its largest cities also happen to be college towns as well. Some wonder if tariffs on China will make farmers here turn blue. PBS says farmers here will still likely support Trump, as they see the trade war as being a good thing in the long term. And PBS knows everything, people. Georgia was a Democrat state forever. Most people don't remember that it was the Democratic Party which supported slavery, and it was the Republican Party which wanted to stop slavery. Georgia needed slaves big time, so they supported the Democratic Party. But then in the mid-'80s, the state switched big time and voted solid red for a stretch. Now it's a lot closer than ever. Georgia's one of only 6 states to have shifted to the left in each of the last 3 presidential elections. Today, Georgia is slightly Republican, but red voters only outnumber blue voters by 2 percentage points. Why? One factor is the increasing number of white, educated Americans into places like Atlanta. But a lot of Georgia's influence has to do with black voters. Georgia has a large African American population, which tends to vote Democrat. But remember what we said earlier about slavery? Many black Americans feel they're due reparations because of slavery, not knowing that it was the Democratic Party which fought so hard and so long to keep their ancestors enslaved. In Arizona, Republicans hold a slight 2 percentage point edge in terms of registered voters, and Trump edged Hillary Clinton here by only 4 points. The political divide in Arizona today is way closer than it's been since 1996. And before that, Arizona hadn't voted for a Republican for president since 1948. A big reason this state is so politically divided now is the Latino voters. 31% of Arizona is now Hispanic, which is the 4th highest rate in the nation.
72% of Hispanics in Arizona are born in the USA.
Thanks, Google Mappy. Good point. So we know that traditionally Hispanic voters tend to vote Democrat, but if most of the Hispanics here are 2nd and 3rd generation, are they more likely to continue voting Democrat? The answer is maybe. American-born Hispanic voters want a border wall because they don't want illegal immigrants taking their jobs. They also have a sense of pride in America because they are now Americans. They're also Catholic, which tend to vote Republican. There are more Hispanics who vote red than you might think. But a bigger issue at play outside of the surging Latino population is Phoenix. 60% of all voters in Arizona are in Maricopa County, and whichever party wins Phoenix wins Arizona. Phoenix is the fastest growing city in America right now, and the types of people moving here are white, suburban, educated Americans who tend to vote Democrat. So Arizona is tightening up. Here in Wisconsin, Democrats currently hold a slight 2-point percentage lead in registered voters. It's been super close here over the last 20 years, but Wisconsin has continued to vote Democrat since 1988. You can see it was in 2008 when Wisconsin went hard left. Hardly anyone in Wisconsin voted for John McCain in droves. In fact, no other presidential candidate had ever won as many votes in Wisconsin than Obama did that year. But then things tightened up again, and Trump took this state by less than 1 percentage point in 2016. But why? This article explains it. There's been a shift of white, socially conservative working class voters from the Democrat to the Republican Party. People who say religion is very important to them. And apparently this shift has been accelerating because the Democrat Party has tilted much further left than the typical Midwestern Democrat likes. So, Midwestern folks don't like the ultra-left policies that are coming out of Washington, D.C. right now. Another angle to this is lack of interest. Trump won in 2016 on low voter turnout. There are probably a lot of Wisconsin folks who don't like Trump, but who don't like the far-left agenda either, so they don't vote at all. There used to be no other state that was more hardcore Republican than Texas. But Republicans in the Lone Star State only hold a 3 percentage point lead in current registered voters today. 1976 was the last year Texas voted blue for president, but this state's changing fast, mister. Texas is the fastest growing state in America. Lots of people are coming here from California and from cold inner cities of the Northeast, and they're bringing their voting preferences with them. And, like in Arizona, Texas's Hispanic population is exploding here too. Texas turning bluer doesn't sit well with old school Texas folks, but there's nothing they can do except to try to convince their friends and neighbors to change their minds at the voting booth. And that is hard to do, hombre. Little New Hampshire doesn't have a lot of electoral votes, but it's still worth discussing because this state is interesting. Democrats currently outnumber registered Republicans by 3 percentage points. You can see back in 1992, the state switched over from red to blue. Hey, that rhymes. In 2016, it was super close. Clinton won by less than 3,000 votes, which means every single vote counts here, mister. But how did this happen? How does a state whose motto is live free or die become so politically divided and even left-leaning? Typically, Democrats get most of their votes in big, diverse cities, but there are no big or diverse cities here. New Hampshire's blue for a few reasons. It has more college students per capita than any other state, and they get a lot of people moving over from Vermont, which votes blue all the time. And wealthy retirees are starting to show up in New Hampshire, many of which support the Democrats. But it's going the other way as well. A lot of the new people moving to New Hampshire are conservatives fleeing Massachusetts, folks who want better schools and low taxes. So this state's probably going to be politically divided for a long time, pal. Of course, Florida has been a swing state for a while now. It was the swing state back in 2000 when Bush edged Gore during the controversial hanging Chads recount, eventually winning the whole state by a mere 537 votes, and the whole presidency by 537 votes.
An election in turmoil, a presidency in the balance, a nation waits. Who will emerge the winner in the historic Florida recount?
Here in Florida, the presidential contest gets tighter by the hour. With the new counts going on, ABC News has an unofficial tally now that George Bush leads by 279 votes.
Damn.
Now, there are two other strange-sounding categories that were not counted as votes. The first one is called the dimpled Chad. That is that there is an indentation in the Chad. The voter put some pressure on it, but didn't detach it at all from the ballot. Not counted. The final category is the pregnant Chad. That is, the Chad was pierced with a hole, but not detached at all. Those were not counted.
I wonder if anyone knows which 537 people decided the presidential election that year. Today, Democrats outnumber Republicans by about 3 percentage points, but the Republicans have been working really hard to out-register the Democrats lately. And Florida's very complicated, as people move here from all over the place and bring their various backgrounds and beliefs with them. You have retirees from the Midwest, wealthy people from the Northeast, immigrants from the Caribbean, rednecks from Alabama, soccer moms, hood rats, and they all vote differently, people. Democrats live in Miami, and the rest of the state leans red, and in some cases, like up in the Panhandle, hard red. You can almost draw a line in Florida, right in the sand. North Carolina's super close right now, as Republicans hold a teeny 1% lead over Democrats if you count all the registered voters. This state was way red after the civil rights era ended in the 60s, but is now just about as divided as a state can be. I live here, I know. You see all the Trump flag boat parades on the coast, and Trump signs in yards all over the rural areas, and then all the Trump haters and the protesters in the bigger cities. And it seems like now, just about everyone moving here is an educated, white, middle-class family looking for a peaceful life. Those are Democrats all day long, fella. Mappy, who are you voting for?
Trump. Trump. Trump.
No.
Okay then. So that's North Carolina, and that's our list. Here's North Carolina and the rest of the country. There are probably no surprises here, pal. So those are our nation's most politically divided states. The places in America where it's just about 50-50 when it comes to how people think about politics. And as you can see, every vote counts in those states. So if you live in one of those states, vote. Just don't tell your friends and your neighbors and your relatives and people you work with or anybody on social media how you voted, because if you do, it's going to cause a lot of drama. The end. These are the states where all the people are split, the states where it's close, where voters will decide who wins our elections each year. The elections will be historically closer than they've ever been, you have to agree. If you want friends, don't tell them how you will vote. Hey guys, if you learned something new about America or what it's like to live in America, great! You should think about subscribing and turning on your notifications. You can also click one of these videos or playlists for more. You can also now buy my songs on iTunes and other formats. Click the link in the description. Thanks for watching. And remember, while we all might have different views, we should all be nice to each other and try to make the U.S. a better place in a positive way.